Hello and welcome to the latest Redwoods Dowling Curve webinar. Today I am delighted to be joined by Harmajinder Hayre, who is an employment law partner at top 100 law firm Ward Hadaway. Harmajinder, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Andrew. First of all, good morning, everybody. My name is Harmajinder, and now for the last 4 months, my workload has almost exclusively centered around advising employers on the HR/employment law implications of COVID-19. In particular, there's been lots of advice on how the furlough scheme works and how you can make a claim as an employer. I've also spent quite a bit of time helping employers understand the range of options available to them, given the downturn in economic activity, such as changes to terms and conditions, reorganizations and headcount reductions. And finally, with a push to get the economy up and running, my work with employers has started to focus more around helping businesses get back to work on the health and safety side, the test and trace, flexible working, and inevitably planning for workforce redundancies. Now, I know a large number of our clients are from the childcare sector, so I'm familiar with some of the challenges that those sectors are facing, and hopefully I can draw upon some of the experience when dealing with the webinar this morning.
Great, thank you very much for that. So today's format will be a 20-25 minute discussion with a question and answer session held straight after. On your screens, you will see a questions box. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the webinar. Some attendees have already submitted questions, and some of these have already been built into the content of the discussion. So, first question, what is the Flexible Furlough Scheme?
Okay, in a nutshell, at present, if you are on furlough leave, you can't do any work for your employer. It's basically an all or nothing approach. Employees are either at work and the employer then can't access the government's grant via the job retention scheme, or employees are on furlough leave and the employer can access the grant. Now, under the Flexible Furlough Scheme, as of 1 July, employees can work and employers can still access the government's grant. So this is really a major change from the current scheme that's in operation. And essentially, they can start to work for some of the week and be furloughed for the rest of the week.
Okay, so from the 1st of July, which employees are eligible?
Okay, you can only furlough an employee if you have previously submitted a claim for them under the job retention scheme for a period of at least 3 consecutive weeks between the 1st of March and the 30th of June. So furlough, and this is important, is restricted to those employees who have been furloughed before. The last date that you can have furloughed an employee for the first time for a period of 3 consecutive weeks was 10 June. Now, the only exemption is for those currently on statutory leave, such as maternity and paternity or parental leave. Now, if they have not been placed on furlough before the 1st of July 2020, because they were on statutory leave, then they can also be placed on flexible furlough post 1 July. So if you've got someone who's on maternity leave and they're not going to come back until the 10th of July, it's still possible for you to place them on furlough leave.
And is there a cap on the number of employees who you can place on flexible furlough leave?
Yes, there is, and you need to be really careful here because as of the 1st of July, this cap will be in relation to the number of employees you can have on furlough at any one time. So the number of employees you can claim for in any claim period starting from the 1st of July can't exceed the maximum number of employees you claim for under any claim ending by the 30th of June 2020. So the cap is going to be specific to each employer. I think the best way to really explain this is by just working through an example. So say, for instance, in March, you furloughed 10 employees. In April, you increased that to 15 employees. And then in May, it remained at 15. And then in June, you reduced it to 10. The maximum number you can claim for in terms of furlough from July onwards will be 15, because that's the maximum number in April and May that you could claim for.
Okay, and how does an employer set the hours that their employees will work under the flexible furlough?
Okay, it's entirely up to the employer to agree with the employee to decide how they're going to split the hours of work and how they're going to split the hours of furlough. When claiming for employees who are flexibly furloughed, you shouldn't claim until you are sure of the exact hours that you know they're going to work for during that claim period.
Okay, and do you need to have a new written agreement with those employees?
You should already have a written furlough agreement stroke letter with those employees that you've furloughed already. But if you're going to move them from full-time furlough to flexible furlough, then you will need a new agreement that confirms the new furlough arrangements. So you need to speak to your employees and confirm the hours of work with them that you'll be asking them to do in writing under the new flexible furlough scheme. As before, the employee doesn't need to provide a written response, but there needs to be an agreement that documents this in writing. Now, given the intention behind flexible furlough is to allow employers to increase or decrease the amount worked by an employee based on demand, it's likely that there'll be multiple agreements that need to be entered into with the same employee when they're working different work patterns or shifts in the short to medium term. So you've got to constantly keep these agreements up to date, depending upon the changing needs of the business in terms of what hours and what shifts the employee is going to be working when on flexible furlough.
And am I correct that if you have employees already on furlough, full-time furlough, and those employees are already in a written agreement, that you are able to carry on that agreement if you intend to keep them in full-time furlough?
Yes, but just one word of caution. When most employers put in their employees on furlough leave, the intention, they couldn't really have envisaged that the furlough leave period was going to last for this period of time. And rightly so, because when the government first announced the furlough scheme, they said it would run from March, April, May, and June until the end of June. So those agreements that have been entered into at the outset, when you placed employees on full-time furlough, were very much around the scheme coming to an end or the furlough being reviewed at the end of June, end of May, but we know it's been extended considerably now until the end of October. So it's probably worthwhile when you're writing out to your employees to place them on flexible furlough, if there's still some that you're going to keep on full-time furlough, just to confirm to them that you're extending the scheme on full-time furlough dependent upon the needs of the business.
Okay. And what records do employers need to keep?
Just like the old scheme, there is a record keeping obligation here. As an employer, you're going to need to keep a copy of the written agreement agreeing to go on furlough leave, flexible furlough leave for a period of 5 years. If the hours of work change from that which you initially agree, you're also going to be likely to need to keep a new written agreement to cover each separate arrangement. Secondly, you're also going to need to keep records of how many hours your employees work and how many hours they are furloughed for, so not working. And you've got to keep these records for 6 years together with a record of the amount claimed, your claim reference number, and your calculations. There's some pretty complex Excel spreadsheets that are probably going to be in existence going forwards.
So why do you have to keep a copy of the written agreement for 5 years, but hours worked for 6 years?
Andrew, you know what? Honest answer, I have absolutely no idea. I suspect it's probably just to confuse us.
I think I agree there. And so under flexible furlough, is there a minimum furlough period?
Yeah, it's now changed. Under the old scheme, that's still in existence, instead of being 3 weeks, it's now technically any period, okay? But however, 7 days is the minimum claim period you can make a claim for. So you should work towards that if you want to recover the grant. There's also, and this is really important, there's also a new claim period. Employers are going to have until the 31st of July to make any claims for claims periods up to 30 June. That's the end of the old scheme. From 1 July, claim periods must start and end within the same calendar month and must be at least 7 days unless you're claiming for the first few days or the last few days in a month. Now, you can only claim for a period of fewer than 7 days if the period you're claiming for includes either the first or the last day of the calendar month and you have already claimed for the period ending immediately before it. So for example, if an employee is furloughed for 7 days spanning over 2 months, so let's say the end of 3 days at the end of June and 4 days at the start of July, you've got to claim for the 3 days by the end of June, and you've got to then claim for the 4 days in the July calendar month. The crucial point is that you can't make claims that cross calendar months.
Okay. So are you saying that we can unfurlough for a week, then put back to furlough, so effectively employers can dip in and out of furlough?
Yep, that's precisely why the government have introduced this scheme. They know that when businesses are not going to bounce back and be back at pre-COVID levels immediately, so they need to be able to have the flexibility to match the needs of their employees with the demands of their customers. The current scheme, which comes to an end on the 30th of June, is an all or nothing scheme. This really is quite advantageous for employers because it gives them that flexibility to dip in and out of flexible furlough depending upon the needs of the business. But remember, it's only in relation to those employees that have been placed on furlough leave prior to the 10th of June and have been on leave for at least 3 weeks.
Okay, now moving on to the remuneration side, what can you actually claim for?
It's pretty simple. You can make a claim on a prorated amount for 80% of salary based on the proportion of hours not worked out of the employee's normal working hours.
Okay. So on today's webinar, majority of the attendees are from the childcare, early years sector or healthcare sector. In these sectors, they are likely to have staff who work flexible hours or are on 0-hour contracts. Firstly, for staff who work flexible hours, will they need to take an average of hours worked per day over the previous year? And secondly, will the flexible furlough scheme apply to 0-hours staff? Can employers place them on flexible furlough if they don't have set contractual hours each week?
Okay, let's deal with the easy one first. In terms of 0-hours contracts, you can place an employee on furlough leave if they're on a 0-hours contract. That's definite, okay? The more difficult one in terms of how you go about calculating it relates to employees on flexible hours, which is quite common within the care and the early years sector as well. The way you've got to approach it is that if you're on an employee who's on variable hours or receives variable pay, you take the higher of either A, the average number of hours worked in the tax year 2019 to 20, or B, the corresponding calendar period in the tax year 2019 to 2020. And crucially, when you calculate the hours, the usual hours, you also have to include any hours of leave for which they were paid their full contractual rate, such as annual leave, and any hours worked as overtime, but only if the pay for those overtime hours was not discretionary.
Okay, thank you. Can you still furlough workers on a full-time basis?
Yes, you can. You can continue to furlough employees until the 31st of October 2020 on a full-time basis. But just remember that from the 1st of August, as an employer, you'll need to start to contribute to the cost of that furlough scheme.
Okay. What about holiday rules? Are these changing from the 1st of July?
There are no changes to holiday rules. Employees continue to accrue leave during furlough, whether they're on full furlough or flexible furlough, and can take leave during furlough. So as long as you top the grant up to full pay for any days taken as holiday. Now, it's in the employer's interest to have employees placed on full-time furlough when on holiday, so you can maximize the claim under the grant.
Okay, I'm going to bring into play a question that was submitted yesterday from a lady called Gillian. If we have staff on furlough at a nursery and others back in work, can those on furlough go on holiday without using their allowance, whilst those at work would have to use their allowance?
The short answer to that is that when somebody is on furlough leave, that is entirely separate and different to when somebody is on holiday leave. So unless you, in your written agreement with the person who's on furlough leave, included some kind of provision which requires them to be available within a certain period of time in terms of preventing what they do whilst they're on furlough leave, so long as they're not in conflict of interest, they're not working for a competitor, they can pretty much do whatever they want to. So if they do want to go on holiday, there's not much you can do about that. What you might want to do, and I've started seeing employers doing this, is that when they're writing out to individuals on to update them on the flexible furlough leave provisions, they're writing out to, they're making it conditional so that when they're placing them, getting their agreement to place them onto flexible furlough leave, they're making it conditional that the employee has to be available to come into work on flexible furlough within a reasonable period of time. And given that you're trying to match the needs of the business with the number of employees, it's reasonable, in my view, to have a time period there that they've got to be ready, willing, and able to work as and when the employer needs them to be. So anything between 24 hours to 48 hours notice. But you need to really try to build that into your agreement with the employees.
Okay, so when furlough was originally announced and we were entering into lockdown, many furloughed employees were encouraged by the government to take part in volunteer schemes. What if an employer has an employee who currently does volunteer work?
First of all, volunteering will still continue whether you're on full-time or on flexible furlough. Just to be clear, that if though you are on flexible furlough and your employer wants you to come back to work on a flexible basis, those days that you're at work, clearly you're not going to be able to volunteer if you're back full-time on those days. That's fine. Those days that you're off work and you're on flexible furlough, it's still possible for you to volunteer work, carry out volunteering work.
Okay. And I guess another slightly grey area relates to training. What if your employee does training for your business?
Again, same principle as volunteering. If the employee is doing training, then so long as the employee doesn't provide services to the employer or generate revenue for the employer, then they're entitled to undertake training while still being on furlough leave. However, for that period of time that they are undertaking training, they're entitled to be paid at least the appropriate national minimum wage for that time. I guess, let's say an employer wants someone to come back and work flexibly on furlough for them on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Thursday, Friday, they're on furlough leave, but once a month they do some training on a Friday. That's perfectly permissible, subject to the employer paying them the national minimum wage entitlement during the time spent training on the Friday.
Okay. There are many employees at the moment who are shielding for health reasons. And I believe the announcement was made that shielding employees can no longer shield from the 1st of August. How does an employer work with employees who are shielding for flexible furlough reasons?
I think I lost you there for a minute, Andrew. My connection went, but I think you're asking me about employees who are shielding and how the rules change as of the 1st of August. Okay. If an employee is not able to work because they're shielding in line with public health guidance, or they need to stay at home with someone who's shielding, they can be furloughed as long as they've previously submitted a claim for them in relation to the furlough period for at least 3 consecutive weeks taking place at any time between the 1st of March and the 30th of June.
And what if the employee has caring responsibilities?
Again, if the employee has caring responsibilities, so long as they've been furloughed for a period of at least 3 consecutive weeks taking place anytime between the 1st of March and the 30th of June, they are entitled to be furloughed.
Okay, so a couple of questions that have come in relating to this part. One question is, can I take a shielding member of staff off furlough on the 1st of July and ask him or her to work from home on the FFS now that the shielding measures have been extended?
So long as that shielding employee who you're asking them to work,
Okay, and hello, we're having a few little technical glitches. Can you hear me, Harmajinder? Hello?
Hi, Andrew. Yeah, I think a few gremlins. I think I've got this pop-up saying the audio connection has been lost, but I can hear you again now. So can you just repeat that last question?
Yeah, so we've got somebody who's wants to know if they have a shielding member of staff, can they take them off furlough on the 1st of July and then ask him or her to work from home on the FFS now that the shielding measures have been extended?
Yes, they can. So long as that person has been on furlough leave for at least 3 consecutive weeks.
Okay. And another one has said, my manager has difficulty securing childcare until September at the earliest. She is asking to work on 3 days a week. What is the position with her being on furlough the other 2?
You know, that's a really common scenario that a lot of employees are finding themselves in. And that's one of the reasons why the Flexible Furlough Scheme has been put in place. There's nothing to stop an employer agreeing with their employee that you work 3 days and for the other 2 days you remain on furlough leave.
Okay. And following on from that, if your employee is self-isolated or on sick leave, what do you do?
Okay. Right from the start, employers have had the ability to furlough extremely vulnerable employees who need to self-isolate or need to shield. Now, if your employee is on sick leave or has been self-isolating as a result of COVID, including as a result of test and trace, they'll be able to get statutory sick pay subject to all the eligibility criteria applying. And crucially, there's no special exemption for them. So they would need to meet the usual requirements to be placed on furlough, i.e. they should have been placed on furlough for at least 3 weeks before 1 July. If we're going to furlough somebody who is self-isolating or on sick leave, otherwise they can't now be furloughed.
Okay, now moving on, we've got some clients on here who are in the process of buying another business. How do the new rules work with in a 2P situation?
Okay, originally when the rules were introduced, there was lots of confusion and complexity as to whether or not it applied in a 2P scenario. Thankfully, the government's given some really more clarity around that, and the position is that yes, you can take advantage of furlough in a 2P scenario, and basically the new employer can claim under the scheme in respect of the employees of a previous business transferred after the 10th of June, so long as firstly 2P or PAYE business succession rules apply to the change in ownership, and B, the employees being claimed have previously had a claim, so the employees of the previous employer have previously had a claim submitted for them by their employer prior to the furlough period for at least 3 consecutive weeks. So the same rule is what applies to everybody else.
Okay, and how does that work if the acquirer is doing a share purchase situation where there is no 2P?
Same principle, Andrew.
Okay, good. Right, so and I've had this question offline a number of times. Many business owners obviously happy running the businesses, and then out of the blue, bang, this came along. And to the point where some businesses were told to stay open to work with key workers, some businesses were told to close and close with immediate effect. Many employers started on the furlough scheme, and before the guidance was even released, particularly in the childcare sector, where it was changed over and over again. What are the rules now around if employers have made a claim and have claimed the wrong money?
Okay, that's something that is likely to happen because of the speed and some of the lack of detail and clarity of the furlough scheme that was introduced. Basically, but HMRC are going to check claims and payments may be withheld, or employers may be required to pay them back if a claim is found to be fraudulent or based on incorrect information. There's going to be a new finance bill which is going to be introduced, I think later next month, and that's through which the HMRC are going to be able to pursue employers who break the rules. Now, essentially, if HMRC suspects that an employer has broken the rules in making a claim, it can impose 100% tax rate on the payments that have been made. Also, HMRC can prosecute those employers which fail to pay those tax demands. Now, once the new finance bill becomes law next month, any employer that's received money under the scheme will have 30 days to self-declare a mistaken application and pay back the money without a penalty. So there is a self-correction mechanism in those circumstances where a wrong claim has been made.
Okay, thanks for that. That was useful. So essentially, there's a 30-day period to get your readjustments in and make sure that you're fine. Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of the first part. I'm just going to do a couple of polls now, and then I have about 20 questions that I will try and rattle through. Some of these questions might relate to some of the topics, so if they do, and some of them might be quite technical, so maybe we'll take them offline. Now, about 4 weeks ago, I ran a webinar where I asked about headcount reduction, and I'm interested to see now that the world has moved on ever so slightly, where the percentages are. So we have a similar sized audience today. On your screen, you will see a poll which asks you if you will be reducing your headcount during the next 3 months. And I'm very interested to see how that's shifted from over a month ago, now that there's some clarity in the world that we are looking to do. So just another couple of seconds on that. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much for answering that. Now, next one. Very, very quick poll, a yes or no. We can't go into all the details of everyone individually. Bugger, just pressed the wrong one there, sorry. What I was going to ask, if anybody wanted to speak to Harmajinder offline themselves, just to tick the poll, and we would contact them. If you just put in the question box, please contact me, then I will arrange for that to happen. So starting with the first question, I have some term time only staff. Can I claim furlough for them over the summer when they are actually on leave?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've got to say, I've not come across that question before, so that's not a good start to the Q&A section. But so they would ordinarily be on. Now, would we be paying them as well? If we're paying them, then my view would be that you would still be able to put them on to furlough leave. So you would switch the holiday leave from holiday leave to furlough leave.
Okay. And second question, can you make staff redundant during furlough?
Short answer to that is yes, you can. You can still make redundancies, subject to ensuring that you follow the fair process. So common areas where there's some shortfalls in the redundancy proposals and process so far. Employers are asking, well, can I, those that are still working with me, can I make redundant the staff that are on, I have performance issues with, or capability issues with, or they're not right for the business? You've got to still run a fair process and a fair selection exercise as well. Otherwise, you could end up with an unfair dismissal or discrimination type of claim.
Okay, thank you.
But there's nothing to stop you from making employees redundant whilst on furlough leave.
But you just have to run it in a fair manner as you would a normal position.
Yeah, I think there's probably one other advantage for the employer if they do go down the route of making people redundant whilst they're on furlough leave, is that the one financial advantage for the employer is that if you then, after you've run your process and you serve notice, you can use the percentage grant that the government are paying you at the moment under the furlough scheme to count towards the notice payment.
Okay. Good. Next question. Can an employee who is working 3 days a week be furloughed for the other 2 and they use holiday entitlement on the 2 days?
There's nothing to stop you from doing that, so long as you comply with the holiday requirement notification rule. So if it's the employer that's saying to the employee on 3 of the days you need to be working and taking work on flexible furlough, for the other 2 days I want you to be taking annual leave, normally there's a notice requirement. So long as you comply with that, you're fine. Very importantly though, there's a financial advantage for the employer to when somebody is on flexible furlough, get them to, you place them on full-time furlough and get them to take the holidays at that point, then you get the full 80% contribution from the government as it currently stands. So there's a financial incentive to get them to take holiday leave whilst they're on flexible furlough as well.
Okay. If I have staff on furlough from the 22nd of June for a planned 3 weeks, can I switch to FFS instead of keeping them on full 3-week furlough?
If they're on the 22nd of June, you can't switch to FFS until the 1st of July. So long as
could you furlough them from the 22nd of June and then automatically go into FFS on the 1st of July?
No, because you have to have taken up the furlough option in respect to the staff before the 10th of June, and then that's the 3-week period would coincide with the end of the old scheme, which is the 30th of June. So if you haven't put your staff on furlough as of yet, then you can't take the advantage of either the full-time furlough or the flexible furlough going forwards.
Okay, I have 2 staff who were fully furloughed, but were brought back to work on reduced hours as of the 8th of June. Can I put these 2 employees on flexible furlough?
So long as the 2 staff were placed on full-time furlough for a period of, at some point for a period of 3 consecutive weeks, and a claim was made for them prior to them being brought back on reduced hours, then you can.
Okay. Who pays for national insurance and pension contributions in July? Is it the government or businesses?
Government pays in July. It changes as of the 1st of July.
Okay. Okay. Could you please clarify how to calculate annual leave during the furlough period? Does the employee have to pay part of the 80%?
Nope. Employee doesn't have to pay part of anything in terms of the 80%. In terms of how you calculate it, it will differ depending upon whether you've got fixed hours, fixed pay, or whether you're working variable hours or receive variable pay.
Okay.
That's another way of saying it's a complex calculation, which it's hard to.
Okay, I think the answer to this one's the 1st of July, but when does the flexible furlough start, July or August?
Andrew, I'm going to turn you into an employment lawyer. It's the 1st of July.
Great, thank you very much. I must admit, some of these questions are like an essay. I think we'll pick some of these up offline. Can I clarify, if we acquire a business by asset transfer, i.e. not the pay as you earn of the acquired company, what happens with furlough?
Again, I think that's something for me to pick up offline because there's quite a bit of detail that I need. But basically, if it's an asset transfer and 2P applies, then you can still rely upon furlough, so long as those employees have been furloughed by their existing employer for at least 3 consecutive weeks. And in order to rely upon furlough after the 10th of June, it's either PAYE or 2P. So if 2P applies and does with an asset transfer, and so long as you meet the other parts of the rule, then you should be okay. But again, there's quite a bit of assumptions being made there by me.
Okay, after this, I think Ward Hadaway needs to put 50p in the Wi-Fi router, just to give you a bit more bandwidth for this. Next question, can you put through a mandated contractual change in days time of days worked, whilst actual hours worked remain unchanged? And this is due to staffing needs arising from learning bubbles. Oh, bugger, he's gone again. Hello, are you back?
I think I'm back on.
You are back on. Did you hear that question?
I didn't. I'm afraid you're going to have to repeat it again.
Okay. Can you put through a mandated contractual change in days time of days worked, whilst actual hours worked remain unchanged due to staffing needs arising from learning bubbles?
I can't see why you can't, because it's entirely up to the employer and the employee to agree shift patterns, hours of work, days of work. So if the hours are not changing, but the days or the shift pattern is changing, that's perfectly permissible under flexible furlough. What you can't do is just impose it on the employee. You've got to get the employee to agree to move to flexible furlough. So if they're currently on full-time furlough at the moment, and you want them to come back to work and work flexibly, you have to get their agreement.
Okay. Next question is, how long would the furlough scheme be? Is there any chance of it going beyond 2020?
Okay, as it currently stands at the moment, the Chancellor has said it will come to an end on the 31st of October 2020. I do know that there's loads of lobbying being done in the leisure, retail and hospitality sector to at least extend it beyond 31st of October 2020, albeit on a taper relief kind of mechanism.
Okay. If a member of staff has been on furlough from April until May the 29th, then taken off furlough to work in June, but then needs to go back on furlough part-time from July or August, is this allowed?
Short answer, yes, it is, so long as there's been a period of time where that member of staff has been off for 3 consecutive weeks and a claim's been made, which from April to the end of May, you should be able to satisfy that.
Okay. If a member of staff returns from furlough a couple of days before the 1st of July, e.g. Monday the 29th of June, after the 1st, can they do the flexible hours on furlough part-time and work part-time?
So long as they work full-time from the 29th to the 30th, they can then go on to part-time from the 1st of July, subject to them having been off in that initial period for at least 3 consecutive weeks.
Okay, and a couple more questions. Is the furlough still up to a maximum of 80%? So if someone works 15 hours but is contracted for 20, can we furlough for 5 hours or just 1 hour to take up to 80%?
The way I read that would be you'd furlough for 5 hours and then it's the 80% of the 5 hours.
Okay. And when an employee resigns during furlough, what salary do you pay employees during the notice period? Is it 100% or 80%? And can this be claimed under the coronavirus job retention scheme?
Okay. So if there's an agreement in place, if the employee's on furlough leave and they then resign, then the requirement is for you to pay. They can remain on furlough leave during their notice period, and during that notice period, whilst they're on furlough leave, they would only receive the maximum they're entitled to under the statutory scheme. So up until the end of July, it would be 80%. Then it goes down to 70% in August and 60% in September. Sorry,
Okay.
70% in September and then 60% in October.
So next question. I have just done my claim for June, but our working pattern is the 26th to the 25th of the next month. I was advised I could claim the 26th to the 30th of June in July. Is that now correct?
Yeah, it's still correct, because it's the same. You're claiming for that calendar month in the same month. Sorry, in the next month.
Okay. And we will just squeeze one more in. And can I, having done the consultations and agreed with staff, reduce their contracted hours and adjust furlough pay as well as employers' contributions accordingly while staff are still on furlough? I am referring to August and beyond.
You can do. It's going to be tricky because you're asking staff to both take the reduction already in terms of their normal weekly pay being reduced down to 80%. And then what you're also doing is asking them to reduce their salary further, and then whatever that further reduction is, only 80% of that. So I think you're going to, unless there's, I think you will find quite a bit of resistance there from the staff, and even if they do agree, unless they're prepared to agree that with immediate effect, you would have to give notice of termination under the contract to put in place the new reduced hours, sorry, reduced remuneration.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we do have a number of questions that aren't answered. So what I'm going to do is bring the poll back into play. If any of you would like to speak to Harmajinder offline about this, if you could just click yes or no, what I will do is I'll forward the details to Harmajinder so that you guys can speak about your own bespoke personal details. Apologies for some of the questions that were in excess of 100 words. I think it was very difficult to sort of read those ones on the go. But for those of you who wish to speak to Harmajinder directly, that we will make that happen. And then very finally, and forgive me for this, we've launched a new service 2 months ago on energy savings. And last week we did a deal for a group of homes, and we managed to save them £77,000 over 3 years. Average savings at the moment are 5 figures, taking advantage of the very low rates of energy as the energy market seems to have collapsed. If you are not due for renewal this year and you are a corporate or you are a group operator, we are able to speak to suppliers and get you future contracts. So if you just give us a quick yes, no, or maybe, I can arrange for somebody to speak to you about your own energy position. Okay, so just a couple of seconds on that. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for attending on this lovely hot sunny day. Thank you very much to Harmajinder. We covered quite a lot there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll go and speak to your IT guys and give the old router a reboot so we don't have any more. But thank you everyone for attending. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Harmajinder, if you just hang on a sec. tell you what I'll do. I'm just going to close this down and I'll reach out. Okay.